that one glorious word represents more than just the geography between the Sabine and the Rio Grande. It represents a unique idea and way of life. A life of rugged individualism, proud self-reliance, gritty toughness, and fierce independence. That is what made Texas, and that is what will save her again. Howdy, folks. Sam Houston here. I want to thank you for tuning into the Feed Bandit podcast. Feed Bandit is the Texas first outdoors brand built by rabid Texans, for rabid Texans, and all those who aim to be one someday. We unapologetically promote the ideals that shape our Texas pride and Texas first patriotism through our love of hunting, the outdoors, and the gear and apparel we create. Texas, above all else, preserve the tradition, protect the legacy. Check us out at feedbandit.com. And to repeat that great rallying cry from a former colleague of mine, liberty or death. Now, enough of my talking. Here are a couple of bandits that love Texas as much as I do. Enjoy.
Well, howdy, friend. Welcome back to the Feed Bandit podcast. Jimmy back with you. And on this one, we're going to continue our series on predator strategies. We've been going through talking about various calls and how you call for predators and things of that nature in the last couple of them. Now we're going to talk about coyote communications. And this is it's going to have a lot of technical detail, so might be a little hard to follow, and put to memory all the details by just listening to a podcast, but I think you will find some interesting points that maybe you'll want to go back and look up on your own and study a little further so that you can further understand what the hell the coyote is even saying. So we're going to start this chapter called Coyote Communications and a Scientific Perspective. So over the course of 15,000 years, Canis latrans, in all 20-plus variations, has evolved a complex and varied social structure, which requires a complex and varied communication system. Dr. Philip Lehner, a professor and research scientist at Colorado State University, stated that, quote, "The coyote's ability to adapt to a changing environment is ultimately a consequence of its complex behavior, especially its manifold communication system." End quote. Coyote communication is indeed a manifold system and is comprised of visual, olfactory, tactile, and auditory signals, with the latter being of primary interest to predator callers. Dr. Franz Kamenzind, during his 5-year study of unexploited coyote populations on the National Elk Refuge in Jackson, Wyoming, identified 9 coyote vocalizations. Dr. Lehner identified 11 vocalizations, as did legendary ADC trapper Bill Austin. Dr. Lehner classified the coyote's vocalizations into 3 categories: agnostic, greeting, and contact. Agnostic is defined as aggressive or defensive behavior between individuals of the same species. Anyone who has observed aggregations of coyotes around carrion knows and understands the meaning of agnostic. He further classified them as long-range and short-range communications and universal and individual vocalizations. Evidently, coyote puppies are born with an innate understanding of certain vocalizations. Whether they are born C. latrans umpkensis, C. latrans umpkensis in northwest Washington, C. lantris variety in New Hampshire, C. latrans frustror in East Texas, or C. latrans acropus in coastal California, all of their puppies, regardless of subspecies or geographic locale, are apparently born with an instinctual understanding of universal vocalizations. Sorry for butchering all those names. I don't speak French. Individual vocalizations are those that are taught by the parents to the pups, or by one coyote to another. In addition, I'm convinced that universal vocalizations have individual modifications that coyotes will lend their personal accent to certain howls. Dr. Lehner defined coyote vocalizations as a graded continuum, both within and between vocal types, and vary in intensity through changes in amplitude, frequency, and vocalization type. So Dr. Lehner listed his 11 vocalizations in order along a physical continuum as follows. So if you can picture this, it's 3 columns, and each column, the first column is A for agnostic, B is greeting, and C is contact. So under the agnostic column would have the wool, the growl, the huff, the bark, the threat bark howl, the yelp, and the whine. So those are all the agnostic vocalizations. So that's the aggressive, territorial, what was that? That would be the, let's see, that was, the aggressive or defensive behavior calls. And then you have the greeting, which is a whine, a greeting song, like a wow, wow, and a group yip yow, yip howl. And then the third column is contact. So that'd be a lone howl, a group howl, and a group yip howl. So a group yip howl is both a greeting and contact. Well, that makes sense. Doctors Yeager, Mitchell, McKagan, and Barrett published a paper titled, quote, Information Content of Coyote Barks and Howls, in which they conducted discriminate analysis of spectrograms of recorded coyote howls and barks. They concluded that because of the variations in the length, shape, and volume of the supralaryngeal vocal tract, coyote vocalizations are individually specific, meaning that coyotes can identify the howls of coyotes that are known to them. Their study and others have determined that highly specific information regarding identity, size, age, sex, and emotional state are encoded in coyote howls. Kathleen Fulmer's master's thesis is titled, quote, Characterizing the Functions of Coyote Vocalizations Through the Use of Playback. Wow. What an interesting thing to study and write a master's thesis on. Her objective was to investigate coyote responses to broadcast vocalizations. Ms. Fulmer and her associates broadcast recordings of lone howls, group howls, and group yip howls to 113 radio-collared coyotes in 10 territories on the ALE in Washington state. Fulmer reported that coyotes responded vocally more to grip yip howls than other vocalizations and responded with physical approach more to lone howls. Coyotes responded more often to playback broadcasts within their territory than to playback broadcasts along or outside of their boundaries. Resident coyotes often reposition themselves more toward their core area before responding either vocally or with an approach. Most environmental factors, presence or absence of moonlight, barometric pressure, humidity, and precipitation, were not significantly correlated with coyote movements in response to playback. Movement varied significantly with wind. So let's see what happens when a foreign howler comes in. A caller's perspective. Most of the 11 vocalizations can be successfully used to either entice a physical approach from coyotes of all social groups or to evoke a vocal response from resident members. It is important to know that transients and nomads, which make up as much as 70% of the population at certain times of the year, are generally non-vocal, that announcing their location is usually not in their benefit. Subsequently, when we hear howls, we can be fairly certain that they are being issued by resident coyotes, and we callers can use that knowledge to our benefit. Because coyote vocalizations vary widely in meaning and intention, it would follow that their application to calling would also vary widely. Some vocalizations are of limited utility in that they appeal only to coyotes of a specific status within a specific social group, while others have a much broader appeal to most, if not all, coyotes. Coyotes will respond to vocalizations for one or more of at least 7 different motivations, with social issues and territorial concerns being foremost. The following is a brief description of each vocalization and the manner in which it can be used on stand. So here comes the detail. Agnostic and alarm. Number 1, woof. The woof is a short-range, low-intensity threat or an alarm that is the sound that parents use to send the pups into the den for cover. I use it to stop or position coyotes that are very close to me without scaring the bejesus out of them, as a loud bark will often do. Growl. A short-range, low to high-intensity threat. I use this in the same manner as the wolf, and often in combination with it. 3. Huff. Okay. A very short-range, high-intensity threat that is produced by the forceful and rapid expulsion of air through both the mouth and the nose simultaneously, with the resulting effect of blowing snot and spit in the face of the current object of their discontent. It is produced in a rapid series that results in a chuffing sound. I don't attempt to use this sound because of the context in which the coyotes use it. If any readers do attempt to use it, I recommend that their rabies vaccinations be current. Yeah, you don't want to be attacked, I guess is what it is. 4. Bark. This is a short to long range, low to high intensity threat or warning. This is one of the most controversial of all the vocalizations among callers. One well-known calling video producer states that when he hears this sound, he gets in his truck and drives at least 5 miles before making another stand. Many callers agree that hearing a bark in response to calls means that the caller has been busted, detected, and identified. In reality, coyotes bark for a number of reasons, including to increase their sense of security when confronted by a sound, sight, or smell that intimidates them, whether it's identified or not. Lapdogs bark frantically at unidentified noises, and people whistle while walking along a dark street for much the same reason. A barking coyote can often be approached from a different direction, and called in or in open country, an approach can be made by utilizing a gorilla walk or an ugly cow walk. These are performed by squatting or bending over under a net to obscure the human form, and then duck walking. Close a distance by zigzagging into range. By approaching at a 45-degree angle rather than directly toward the coyote, we can often approach surprisingly close in full view of that coyote. Scott Huber, an ADC trapper for the state of South Dakota, says that he does not use barks with his howls because he feels that many coyote will perceive those barks as intimidating and will not approach. I rarely use barks on a stand to elicit an approach for the same reason, and I will address the reason for this when discussing the next vocalization. I use barks to stop position a coyote where I want it. 5. Threat bark. The threat bark howl. This is probably the least understood and most misused of all vocalizations. It's often called the challenge howl, which I believe is a misnomer and contributes to the confusion associated with this vocalization. Many callers consider a challenge to be an invitation to do battle, similar to the elk challenge bugle. Elk issue these challenges, coyotes do not. As stated earlier, vocalizations are a graded continuum and escalate in intensity as the encounter intensifies. If we consider the barks to be warnings to stay away and not approach closer, and we know that those barks can escalate into threat bark howls, then we can consider the threat bark howl to be exactly that, a threat and demand that the intruder leave now or else, rather than a challenge. Then it helps to put the sound and its application into proper perspective. This vocalization can be spectacularly effective if you set up a stand near a den during denning season, and reports of those responses at that time are probably the reason that so many callers insist on using it. I often hear, quote, "I knew coyotes were in the area and I blew a challenge howl, but nothing showed up." Quite simply, if you set up a stand in overlapping home range, or along boundaries, or even within defended territory, and loudly demand that every coyote within hearing leave now or else, they quite probably will. Transients, nomads, certainly will, and at certain times of the year they comprise as much as 70% of the total population. If you are primarily interested in calling in the greatest number of coyotes, then this vocalization will be counterproductive. If your goal is the selective removal of the alphas and you know that you are within the group's core area, then this can be an especially productive call. All right. The yelp. This is a high-intensity submission or startle response. From a calling perspective, adult yelps can be alarming to coyotes with a low security level and would probably be most effective within the same scenarios as the threat bark howl. Puppy yelps or puppy distress, however, are one of the most effective sounds in the caller's repertoire. They will effectively call in coyotes of all ages and social groups, as well as fox, bobcats, and probably many other predators. Okay, 7. The whine, high frequency. This is a short-range, high-intensity submission. I do not use whines as a primary call. I do use them as coaxers, enticements, and curiosity draws in conjunction with other sounds. All right, so those were the agnostic and alarm calls. Now let's get to greeting calls. So number 1 is a whine, again, but low frequency. This is a short-range, low-intensity greet from subordinate to dominant animals. I use this whine in the same manner as the high-frequency whine. So that means as coaxers, enticers, and curiosity draws. The second greeting is the greeting song. This vocalization perfectly demonstrates the complexity of coyote vocalizations and behavior. Dr. Lehner and Bill Austin both name this the wow ooh wow because it's a mixed sound that apparently results from an oscillation between motivations. The result is a vocalization that grades back and forth between a low-frequency whine, which is a low-intensity submission, and a growl, which is a low-intensity threat. Duplicating these sounds with hand calls and howlers will be an extraordinary feat and beyond my meager talents. However, a recording of the greeting song broadcast within a pack's claimed territory would surely be investigated by the residents. Number 3 greeting is the group yip howl. This is a multifaceted, graded, fluctuating greeting. This is one of the most important vocalizations to the coyote social structure, as the other greetings escalate in excitement. The dominant coyote will generally initiate the howls and is gradually joined by the other group members as the intensity escalates. The howls become modulated, and yips become more frequent, and other sounds are included which have been described as gargles, screams, and laughs. I've witnessed a greeting ceremony that escalated to such a high level of excitement that at least 2 of the subordinate coyotes began yelping as if they were being injured. The social intercourse that this ceremony develops plays an integral role in strengthening social bonds and reaffirming status within the pack. All right, now with contact sounds, the first one being a lone howl. This is the jewel in the caller's repertoire because it is an entire lexicon within itself. Biological research is subject to peer review, which probably results in conservative conclusions by many researchers. I have seen papers that describe the function of the lone howl as, quote, announces location, quote. We lay persons, however, are not held to strict standards, and we are free to speculate as much as we wish. One electronic call manufacturer has 33 coyote vocalizations in their catalog. 18 are lone howls with names such as female solicitation howl, and male domain howl, and adult female western territorial howl, and dominant male rally howl, and lost mate. These names are descriptive and may or may not correctly identify the purpose and intent of the issuing coyote. The inflections, modulations, frequencies, and different durations of the howl change the meaning. A short, low-frequency howl that ends on an ascending note has an entirely different meaning than a short, low-frequency howl that ends on a constant or declining note. One may be a lost puppy howl, the other may be what Jerry Blair calls a bite my butt, you're a dork howl. Until discriminate analysis of vocalizations can adequately identify the purpose and information broadcast in the howls, Jerry's interpretation has as much merit as the call vendor's does. Dr. Lehner proposed that the large inter-individual variations of howls might obscure inter-individual differences between coyotes. This is significant in that it suggests that the research biologists do not know if those large variations and differences are within the howls or between the coyotes. Because howls are individually specific, I don't believe that we can fool any coyote into believing that we are their lost mate, lost puppy, or any member of their pack. Since coyote howls contain specific encoded rule cues, I'm at a loss to know how to encode the information that I'm a 2-year-old, 23-pound female that is lonely into my howls. Since we cannot know with certainty what information we are conveying to the coyotes with our howls, we simply try to convince all coyotes within hearing that we are an unidentified coyote sounding off. Most howls, regardless of how they are packaged and promoted, will accomplish that. A non-aggressive howl and its presentation are of utmost importance when appealing to the greatest number of coyotes to investigate the source of the howls that the caller issues. The caller does not want to intimidate or even diminish the sense of security of the betas, omegas, or transient nomads and discourage their approach. The caller does not want to blast out a hairy-chested bark threat howl from within overlapping home range and send every coyote within hearing distance packing. The alphas for their defended territory and the transients for deep cover. I use a howl that is not so threatening that it even brings in 12-week-old puppies to investigate the source. Follow it up with prey distress or a curiosity trigger. Simple. The second contact is called the group howl. The group howls are lone howls performed by 2 or more coyotes following reunion or in response to distant howling. I don't bother with the group howl on stand because the lone howl is more effective in eliciting an approach response, and the group yip howl is more effective in eliciting a vocal response. So that brings us to number 3, the group yip howl. The group yip howl. This is, I believe, the most interesting of all vocalizations. It is useful for spatial distribution, passive territorial defense, increased pack cohesiveness, and establishes and affirms rank within the pack, and even influences reproductive rate. In addition to all the social functions that it serves, the coyotes just love doing it. Major Boddicker aptly calls it the joy of life call. Because it announces the occupancy of a territory by resident coyotes, it can be considered to be a territorial claim or declaration. As such, it informs all transients and adjacent pack members of the resident's presence, which encourages those coyotes to move along, which in turn facilitates spatial distribution. And I know of 3 studies that have suggested that excessive howling reduces litter size and encourages dispersal. This is the vocalization that researchers use to locate resident coyotes because it elicits a like response more than any other vocalization. My son Tyler and I can reproduce these howls with our hand calls and howlers and occasionally do so to locate the current position of known packs. However, to simply locate coyotes in unfamiliar territory, we will broadcast at high volume a recording of a group yip howl from a speaker held outside the truck window while driving slowly toward the coyote's suspected location. The resident coyotes seemingly hear an approaching pack of coyotes that are claiming that territory, and this technique literally rips a vocal response from the residents. Very much like a loud emergency vehicle siren rapidly approaching their position will often do. As more hunters and more callers exert more and more pressure on coyotes in their comfort zones, their comfort zones become smaller and more remote, and their security levels diminish. These coyotes become reluctant to respond either vocally or by approach. Social issues and territorial concerns still must be addressed, as a skillful caller can often utilize the proper vocalizations with the proper presentation to motivate a resident and even an occasional nomad to investigate the source. In conclusion, it would probably be prudent to quote 2 gentlemen who are not shy about sharing their opinions either. Of course, this is just my opinion. I may be wrong. Dennis Miller. And only the yippers know for sure, and they aren't telling. Scott Huber. All right. So that was a lot of information about coyote communications. I think the key to take away here truly is there are 3 main kind of general types of communication. It's the aggressive, the agnostic, or the aggressive howls and calls, such as like a growl, a huff, a bark, threat bark howl, etc., or a yip or a yelp. Then there are the greetings, which are whines, greeting songs, or the grip, yip, howl. And then there's the contact, which is also a grip, yip, howl, but also a group howl and a lone howl. And the author of this chapter believes the lone howl seems to be the most, I guess, effective howl, where you can, use that to not scare anybody away, but also make, this seems to be the most neutral, I guess, calls is the best way to put it, and gives you the highest shots on goal, with some coyotes. So I'll probably reread this chapter and re-listen to this podcast, especially before I go out to my family's place out in West Texas, where there's seemingly always 8 million coyotes everywhere, especially, right at dusk, to hear them, those song dogs, sing their song, do their grip yip howls and greeting songs and whatnot. It's pretty cool, can be very intimidating, but now that we're arming ourselves with, more tips and tricks and strategies about how to have more successful predator hunts, and particularly in this one, coyote hunts, we should have a little more fun when we're out there, especially if we get either skunked in the deer blind, or if it's off season when there's nothing really to hunt other than pigs, or if you don't have exotics, which pigs, I guess, and other predators and critters. But yeah, just maybe go back and listen to this one again to get a refresher before you head out, like bookmark it or something like that, or do a little more research, online, or go buy yourself a book where it goes into more detail on each of these. On the next predator strategies, we're going to talk about. Well, the next one is entitled. It's more about calling. But we're going to talk about blowing certain ways, and when and where and how. And then we'll talk about guns, what are maybe some proper calibers and things of that nature, depending on what you want to do with the body, I guess, in the end, whether you want the pelt or whether you even really care. So, yeah, with that, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. I hope you learned something like I did. Well, stick around for the next episode of the Feed Bandit podcast. Really appreciate you being a loyal listener. If you haven't yet, check out the Texas History Roundups that come out every day. And we will see you on the next one. I really appreciate it, and y'all take care.
Well, I hope the Bandits gave you an interesting episode that either entertained or educated you. Or better yet, both. Hell, I told them this podcasting thing looks harder to do than defeating Santa Anna. So if you would, please help them out by sharing it with all your like-minded friends to help the Bandits get the word out. And don't forget to check us out at feedbandit.com and grab some gear and apparel to support the cause of Texas. Remember, Texas, above all else, preserve the tradition, protect the legacy. Finally, as I said some time ago on the eve of the great battle, and I vigorously repeat here again, be men, be free men, that your children may bless their father's name. Well, fellow bandit, until next time.